Have you ever waited a very long time for the release of a video game and then been very pleasantly surprised when it hit all of your expectations? Well, that recently happened to me with the release of Jupiter Hell Classic. You see, I played Doom the Roguelike back in the late 2000s. It's sort of like if you took Doom and compressed it down into a turn-based structure, and made it a top-down traditional roguelike, with randomly generated levels and a whole lot of replayability. While I enjoyed it at the time, it was never a game that I got particularly good at. I did get good enough at it to beat it on the lower difficulties, but never good enough at it to call myself good at it. It was just something that I played in queue while waiting for my friends to show up on Ventrilo so that I could go play Counter-Strike with them, as most of your teenagers playing video games did at that time. Now coincidentally, Doom the Roguelike for me means a lot more in my heart than a lot of other games that I played in queue at the time, because Doom the Roguelike opened up a whole world for me. The world of traditional roguelikes. At the time, I'd heard tell of a game called Rogue, but I'd never really taken the plunge into getting deep into the genre itself, which eventually led me to be open to trying games like Dwarf Fortress, which now has given me a career on YouTube. So Doom the Roguelike for me is a game that is very formative, and a game that I spent a lot of time with while waiting for my goddamn friends to get a life and stop sleeping like the rest of us cool kids. I mean, how else was I supposed to play 28 hours of video games per day? So when Jupiter Hell released on Steam, I played a whole lot of it. This was, of course, the kickstarted spiritual successor to Doom the Roguelike. It had a bit of a mixed reception with the traditional roguelike community due to a lot of its modern features, and struggled to gain any kind of mainstream popularity. However, it did well enough that the studio kept afloat and continued to develop it. And it's quite a banger game. But now, a remake of Doom the Roguelike has released on Steam. And it's also a Trojan horse. You see, this is Doom the Roguelike, aside from the fact that it's called Jupiter Hell Classic. The bones and bare mechanics of Jupiter Hell Classic are Doom the Roguelike. Of course, it features new rooms, new enemies, new level generation, and new special levels, and new gear, and an entirely rebuilt character tree. But under the hood, this is Doom the Roguelike, that game that I have so much nostalgia for. And now I mentioned it's a Trojan horse, and you might be thinking, well, why is that? You see, if you go to the Steam Workshop for Jupiter Hell Classic, there's this very suspicious DRL featured here, made by the developer of the video game. If you download this mod and install it, when you launch the game, you're given two options. Launch DRL, which is the legally distinct Doom the Roguelike, or launch Jupiter Hell Classic. Both now contain their own progression structure and awards that the player can earn, and there's even some Steam achievements tied into this mod. Jupiter Hell Classic is a remake of my favorite roguelike, but it's also a Trojan horse to get that roguelike onto Steam. And well, yes, of course, I could go download it for free from the website. The existence of this remake is now bringing new content to Doom the Roguelike. In short, I unknowingly waited for a very long time to play this game again. And in the meantime, the developer created an engine, built a fully 3D spiritual successor, which I played and got a lot of time out of, and enjoyed thoroughly throughout its progress in early access. And now that cycle begins again. I get to play a remake of one of my favorite roguelikes of all time. That includes that roguelike. And as Jupiter Hell Classic gets patches, so is the open source Doom the Roguelike. And I can launch them both from the same executable and support the developer while doing so. Let's talk a little bit about the current status of Jupiter Hell Classic and why I'm so pleased with this release and looking forward to its future. Now, when you take into account that the first release of Doom the Roguelike was in 2002, the game was written using a combination of Free Pascal and Lua. This means that it was in desperate need of modernizing. One of the realities of these traditional roguelikes, especially the ones developed in the late 90s and early 2000s, is they rarely had any kind of mouse support, and people would laugh if you suggested controller support. And while DRL was one of the more approachable traditional roguelikes thanks to its beautiful sprite work by Derek Yu, for a novice player, the older builds still had that initial barrier, stopping players from being able to get further into the game due to its limitation to keyboard only. Eventually, DRL did get mouse support. However, it was still limited in comparison to what you would want in a modern game. The route tracking wasn't all that good and would make you bump into walls. And of course, other issues to do with keyboard-only mode, where if you held down a button instead of tapping to move in a particular direction, a character would often wind up and then speed all the way across the screen all at once. And if an enemy happened to get you in their sights while you were taking 15 turns in a row, you would be gunned down. Thankfully, these new releases have fixed all of these problems. The mouse controls are significantly more intuitive. and the character pathing is a lot better. Keyboard control still exists, and you can rebind all of the keys at your leisure. There is even controller support. I personally don't have a functional controller right now, but I've read reports that it plays quite well on a Steam Deck, so that seems to be in working order. When you dig into the options screen, the game gives you a variety of things that you can mess around with, including sprite size, font size, and fully rebindable keys. And for those traditional roguelike sickos out there, if you really want the game to just hate you and be really mean right off the gate, and you don't want to spend the time unlocking the harder difficulties, you can just unlock that in the options menu, as other roguelikes have done in the past. But if you want a little bit more progression, and you want the harder challenge modes to be unlocked after the fact, then simply leave everything as default, and you will get that horizontal progression experience, with harder difficulty modes unlocking periodically, and optional challenges unlocking as you complete them. For a traditional roguelike, this is about as slick as it gets. Veterans of the genre have become used to certain levels of clunk and jank when it comes to playing these older games. And even more recent, modern examples of attempts at emulating the genre end up feeling slow and sluggish due to over-animating things. Jupiter Hell Classic is quick and snappy, and movement is immediate and responsive, which is generally the intended goal when you're making a game focused on action. And aesthetically, it hits the nail on the head here as well. The sprites are bright and clear. My only complaint is it's hard to tell the difference between 44 ammo and 9mm ammo because the two tiny little bullets look almost identical on the ground. However, when you're moving around in the environment, if you keep an eye on the event log at the top of the screen, it will tell you what type of ammo you're standing next to, making that problem kind of irrelevant, at least once you get the hang of looking up. Even back in the day, old Doom the Roguelike had a way of really distributing viscera around the whole map, and the new art style really shines here. I think the explosions and the destructible environments really allow the player to feel like they are leaving a wall of waste behind them. By the time you've cleared a level, there's usually chunks of walls missing, piles of blood and guts, and of course plenty of exploded barrels that have left a variety of different liquids and contaminants on the floor. The game communicates very well what is a thing that you can pick up, and it lights up very well in the environment. I think a lot of roguelikes often clutter up the screen a lot and end up making the game kind of hard to decipher at a glance, unless you've been staring at it for the last 150 hours. Jupiter Hell Classic, on the other hand, doesn't require this level of time. It's pretty clear what you can and cannot interact with, what you should be interacting with, and whether or not it's better than the other one that you've already got. Weapons and armor are color-coded, so you can quickly tell what is on the ground and whether or not it's the thing that you already have or a better version of it. And certain items in the environment can be interacted with in the format of blowing them up. And sometimes they even have loot inside. If you have spare ammo, it might not be a bad idea to go around shooting these little green boxes, or perhaps breaking the vending machines. The game comes with a variety of environments already, as well as level gen variety. The different zones in the game generate pretty different levels, and each of the main routes, which are represented by the gray staircases, each have their own offshoot routes, which are represented by the green staircases. And of course, boss rooms and special sites are represented by these red staircases. And while a lot of them are avoidable, you could just stick to the basic routes, it does add a lot of variety to your run. Do you think that you're strong enough to take an extra boss fight and maybe get some extra damage or some special items? Might be worth taking those red staircases. Feeling weak and in need of health kits? Might be best to move on and see if you can survive another floor. And if you can't tell, I'm starting to hint at the fact that there's actually a lot of strategy to games like this, and a lot of planning and foresight, as well as the game rewards a lot of player knowledge, or obsessive wiki reading, whether or not you can handle a particular region and continue to progress forward, or maybe hold off for a little bit and take the safe route. Perhaps you feel that your character is strong enough to defeat the final boss, so it's time to just power through and skip the last few floors, and avoid all of the terrifying enemies there, because they don't have a lot of ammo to spare, and you're already running low. But as with all games steeped in strategy, it all starts at the beginning: character creation. There are 3 different pathways a player can take from the start of the game, at least at the time of recording. There are 2 more planned. Now, there is some variance in these classes between Jupiter Hell Classic and the original Doom the Roguelike, but for this, we're going to be focusing on Jupiter Hell. The 3 main classes are Marine, Scout, and Technician. Each of them have unique starting items, passives, and activatable abilities. The Marine has Adrenaline, which gives a plus to dodge and a movement speed boost. The Marine also gets passive healing, and is the only class in the game to do this. As you progress downstairs, you get a percentage of your health back. The Marine is kind of your tank class, or your berserker class if you were to talk in more traditional RPG terms. The Marine can handle a lot of gunfire, and escape from sticky situations, and has the added benefit of being able to take more gunfire because he heals in between floors. Every single class, including the Marine, is equipped with 5 subclasses. These are called master traits, which have prerequisites, and because character creation starts off with you selecting one trait, it's wise to make a decision during character creation which of the master traits you're going to be aiming for, so that you take an appropriate prerequisite that also gives you an advantage in the early game. The second class, who is the Scout, has an invisibility ability, which lasts for 10 seconds. This can be upgraded within their skill tree, and it also grants them a backstab or damage bonus when they break stealth, if the attack itself breaks the stealth. 1 second is approximately 1 turn, so if you intend to use this a lot, you best start upgrading it early, because if enemies see you before you go into stealth, they probably still know where you are. The Scout also has awareness of the exits on any level, making it the best for stealthing around the enemy, although this could end with you being a little bit underleveled by the time you hit the final boss. The last of the 3 classes currently included in the early access release is the Technician. Their passive is a little tricky to explain. All computer maps have tracking data. Essentially what this means is if you find one of these green power-ups that exposes the minimap, it also exposes all of the locations of the enemy units, meaning you can pre-fire into the darkness, which is something I should talk about next. Your line of sight in Jupiter Hell Classic and Doom the Roguelike is not your limited fire range. You can actually hit things outside of this line of sight, meaning if you have an awareness due to the game's audio design or tracking data on enemy locations, you can blind fire and often take out enemies before you even see them. Technicians make this rather easy. Strategies like blind firing are pretty crucial in surviving the higher difficulties of Jupiter Hell Classic. But back to the Technician. Their other passive is they can mod rare weapons, meaning uniques and higher level weapons can be modified, which is what I'll talk about next. They also have an activatable ability that allows them to create a drone right out of their butt. It's quite a powerful ability, especially when you have like 5 or 6 of them running around. And of course, one of those higher level traits that I talked about earlier upgrades your drones to have better weapons and HP. They are a little dumb though. Once an activatable ability for the Marine, the Adrenaline, the Scout, it's the Stealth, the Technician, it's making their drones, has been used, you gain the Tired trait. This can be gotten rid of by using a health kit, or picking up one of the handy-dandy health orbs. Now I did mention modifying items. Around the levels, there are these modification packs. If you find enough of these, or find some of them, they can be added onto your items. And with the correct combinations of modification packs, unique assembled weapons can be created. So essentially, you're trying to craft better versions of your guns. Another form of progression that the game has is while traversing the levels, you can find blueprints. These give you an exact list of what you need to craft those specific items. Of course, this is not stopping you from crafting the items. You could just reference the wiki. But as an added reward, if you stumble upon something, it'll give you the instructions on how to build a cooler item. Earlier in the video I mentioned seconds. This isn't strictly a turn-based game. It's a timeline game. Items and actions and movement takes time. Armor slows you down, as an example, but can be upgraded to slow you down less. Lighter armor that has less protection will slow you down less than heavier armor, which takes more damage. But by default, a lot of actions land on 1 second. Player speed is crucial to long-term survival, and sometimes the best option is to hit W a whole bunch to wait for the enemy to meet you at the door. So whenever the player takes an action, the timeline moves forward by however long that action takes. A fraction of a second or multiple seconds. If you keep an eye on your weapons and your movements, it'll give you a pretty good idea of how long things take and whether or not swapping to that rocket launcher is the best idea instead of simply continuing to fire with your machine gun. But it might still be faster to swap weapons with the Z key than reload. As far as content, a run for me takes about 2 hours. There's already a lot of game here. Tons of different things and items to assemble, plenty of challenge maps, which I haven't even touched yet, lots of achievements to unlock, and plenty of ranks to grind for. Currently, the ranks don't do much outside of bragging rights. Getting wins unlocks the harder difficulties, and completing challenges unlocks harder challenges. But the developer has a lot of plans, and a lot of things are going to be added to this game. And updates with Jupiter Hell and Doom the Roguelike are now in sync. Personally, I'm just a really big fan of this video game, which is why I've made 2 videos of this sort covering it. And to those of you patiently biding your time and waiting for more Dwarf Fortress stuff, don't worry, I've got another video in the chamber, and it's well underway in the editing process. Jupiter Hell Classic is a fantastic coffee break traditional roguelike. It's a no bullshit experience that doesn't hold your hand. It wants you to die, and die a lot. And you will. But as with many traditional roguelikes, if you take the time to master the skill set of understanding the game's mechanics, they can become incredibly rewarding. For me, a lot of this is nostalgia. This is a warm and fuzzy feeling that I felt so many years ago, and I've been having a blast reliving those memories. If you're interested in games like this, or this game in particular, do check it out, or at the very least, huck it on your wish list. As far as I'm concerned, the game's quite affordable, considering there's a second game on the Steam Workshop, but maybe I'm just a fanboy. Who knows? If you do pick the game up, leave it a review on Steam and let them know that I sent you. Considering the icon for this channel is already a skeleton, I feel right at home here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay back. Stay back. That's 2 wins. So far.